Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just going to give another couple seconds before kicking off the presentation to let people join the Zoom webinar today. But for those of you who are already here, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We'll be going over the MSP Playbook, talking about building a cyber resilience service offering for Microsoft 365. Super excited for what's in store for you guys today. Um, but we'll just give it a couple more seconds to let people join in. I still see the numbers rising a little bit. Hello, welcome everyone. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's get started. So before I hand it over to Kyle to take it away with the presentation, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items with you guys today. So first and foremost, Kyle is a great resource. If you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to pop those in the chat or in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. It's the little box with the question mark. We'll do our best to get to those, and if we can't answer them during the session, we'll make sure somebody gets in contact with you after the session. We are also recording this webinar, so if you guys have to hop off early for any reason, or if you'd like to forward the content over to a colleague, you should receive that via email about a day or so after the webinar. And finally, there will be a survey launched at the end of the webinar. If you have any feedback, please feel free to let us know there. And we will also be mentioning a resource, a report that might be helpful for you guys to read. That is included in the resources section, which can also be found at the bottom of your screen right next to the Q&A box. You can access it there, but we'll also email it to you with the recording after the webinar. If you have any other questions, please let me know. But with that, I will hand it off to Kyle to take it away with the presentation. Welcome, Kyle, and thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Thanks, everybody. So my name is Kyle. I'm a solutions architect with Barracuda, and thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today. So I usually like to start these off with a little bit of statistics just to kind of set the stage here. So Microsoft reported back in 2023, and I'm sure those numbers have only gone up since then. Microsoft accounts are under attack 4,000 times per second worldwide. So think of that. There's about 400 million Microsoft 365 users out there, right? It's a huge target. I'm sure you guys see it, your customers see it. Just a kind of a big bullseye there that the attackers have really honed in on. We've run some of our own reports and studies. So some of the information that we found there, about 3 out of 4 organizations have been the victim of a successful email attack. So no surprise, email still remains that #1 threat vector. It's become the preferred method of attack for cyber criminals. And its popularity comes with the high level of success that they've had with these attacks, with the low level of relative effort that it takes to actually launch email-based attacks. With these attacks comes cost. These range from everything from the cost of downtime for a business to the cost of critical business data, and there's some reputational damage that typically comes with becoming the victim of an attack. A third of all organizations that we surveyed reported some sort of direct monetary loss due to cyber criminals. Only about 2% of those respondents actually said that email attacks had no impact on their business, which leaves the remaining 98% that have had some sort of attack that was successful. The average cost of an expensive attack is estimated around $1 million. And then again, 98% of organizations admit that they don't feel fully prepared to deal with email security risks. And as we've seen, these risks and attacks on the rise, they're becoming more sophisticated. They're becoming harder to detect. Organizations are starting to invest more and more money into preventing and responding to such threats. So 26% of organizations that we surveyed reported as having increased their budget specifically based around email security. And then today, about 25% of all emails that are being sent are classified as malicious or spam, which is just a crazy number if we think of the amount of emails that are being sent, the amount of emails that we do for business on a daily basis, right? A quarter of them that are probably never hitting inboxes are actually some sort of malicious content. So attackers are constantly adapting their attacks. They're trying to bypass and get through security since they know that, right, most systems are doing attachment checking. Well, now they've made some changes. They've switched to hiding QR codes within the attachments so that when a system looks at it, right, a vast majority of the systems are unable to detect what the actual link within the QR code is. Gaining access to customers' environments is really the main goal, and about 20% of companies that we surveyed reported to some sort of account takeover. And then even though Google and Yahoo made a huge push for some DNS adoptions like DMARC early in 2024, half of all the companies that we talked to had not yet configured the policy. So still a lot of room for improvement to sort of get up to general standards, but right, this is kind of a moving target and a place that attackers are adapting quickly. So there's a lot of changes being made. So Barracuda, we've published some information around 13 threat types. So this is information that you can find in one of our security trends reports, but just build this out a little bit here. While email is still that primary vector for launching cyber attacks, how they kind of craft these attacks is starting to shift. So phishing now has become the primary risk surface. So most of the email attacks that we see are more of that malware, kind of high-level phishing, spam type of attack. But with the rise of AI, we've started to see the attackers use it to craft these more sophisticated types of attacks. So we've actually mapped out 13 email threat types that we can see here from left to right, less complex, so things like volumetric spam, malware, ransomware attacks, to more complex types of attacks, so payload listless attacks, brand impersonation, user impersonation, account takeover is usually the ultimate goal with a lot of these, but some of these actually layer different techniques together to try to get access to data or try to get access to user accounts. And advanced attacks by volume actually only make up 0.2% of all of the email attacks, but 50% of organizations that were the victim of these attacks are actually victims of these more complicated ones. So they're highly targeted, they're crafted generally specifically for each business that's under attack. So there's much fewer volume, but they tend to be much trickier for users to catch and for systems to catch. And it's really these high volume, high sophistication attacks that are keeping CISOs up at night. So things like conversation hijacking, where an attacker is able to get access to a mailbox, they're monitoring mail flow, and they can seamlessly pick up a conversation between accounts payable and a CFO, right, about maybe a vendor transaction. We see that all the time. Or again, right, the QR code phishing that looks like it's coming from IT and has a nice fancy link to a Microsoft login page where now they've gained access to credentials. Those are the kind of attacks that are doing a lot of harm nowadays. So when an attack is successful, we found the average amount of time that the attacker actually has access and free reign within that user's account is 3.5 days. And this is before they're discovered, before the attack is discovered, and ultimately the threat gets remediated. This is the average that we're seeing. So think about that. That's a lot of time for somebody to be in there to use that compromised account to send out additional email attacks, maybe impersonating that stolen account or using that stolen account to reach out to customers of yours, right, and do some harm there. Time for them to set up inbox forwarding rules. So we talk about that conversation hijacking. Well, now they can monitor all of that user's ingoing and outgoing messages unknown to that user. And really, they use this time to plan their next attack, learn about the company, learn about the business, learn who people communicate with internally and externally, and really craft that next attack. The goal is to ultimately get access to as much data, as much information as they can to be able to get payment there. And we mentioned attackers are evolving, right? Their tactics, their techniques are improving. Every day they're trying to find new tricks to try and bypass security. So instead of just attaching malware directly like they used to back in the day, they know everyone's doing sandboxing and everyone's got different AV engines and stuff like that. Well, how do they try to get malicious files and malicious payloads through those type of engines? That's where we're starting to see they're using legitimate hosting sites and things like multiple link redirects to get these malicious payloads through. So for example, right, maybe they'll send a link in an email. That link points back to some shared file within OneDrive, some text file. So the user goes there, they open the text file. Inside of that document is actually a link to another site to download the file. So all of these hops, all of this obfuscation is really tough for most systems to track when we're talking, 2 or 3 layers deep. Or even like we mentioned earlier, they're taking advantage of a lot of systems today are text-based. So they're really good at reading text, of subjects and text of attachments and bodies. But what happens when we start putting images in place? Systems aren't great at reading images. When we put the QR code in there, it's impossible for a system to, see what that URL goes to. So maybe they can hide links to phishing sites there. Or we've even seen attacks where they'll paste instructions for the user, which is obviously something malicious like, hey, click this link, or I need to update direct deposit. But instead of having it as text in the body, they'll paste it as an image, knowing that systems are, looking for odd phrases and stuff like that in text, but they're not able to actually decipher, even though the words are there in an image, they're not able to decipher the actual contents of that image. So they're getting pretty sneaky with some of this stuff. And 365 holds a lot of important data, thinking back 400 million accounts, 4,000 attacks per second. There's a lot of potential entry points into these different 365 environments. So with email being the primary attack surface, let's look at an example here where there's a phishing email. Let's say that it's successful and it tricks the user into giving away credentials. Well, now the attacker has access to that user's account. They have access to many different internal apps. If it's just a low-level user, they still have access to collaboration tools like Teams. They can possibly steal or encrypt data from OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange. If they get lucky enough and maybe they've tricked an admin, well, now they have access to things like Entra, Intune, conditional access policies. So it's pretty scary with one successful phishing attack, potentially what the attackers could get access to. So this here is going to cover a real world example where we've actually seen a user had their account compromised. So it started with a phishing email. The user clicked the link, they entered their Microsoft 365 credentials, and at that point, the attacker was able to capture these credentials and gain access to the 365 environment. They log in from an unusual location, an unusual device, and about a minute into the attack, they're successfully able to get in and create some of those forwarding rules and create those inbox rules. About 2 minutes later, this customer had our impersonation protection in place. The system detected suspicious activity. We alerted the administrators, but unfortunately, IT was busy with a lot of other things. They were overworked, overloaded, and that notification went pretty much ignored. So it wasn't until 4 days later that the attacker actually used this compromised mailbox to send phishing emails to the user's contacts, and this included the user's customers as well as vendors. It wasn't until this point where we alerted to the more suspicious activity that the admin disabled the account and was then able to remediate the emails through our Barracuda's incident response. But right, kind of thinking the average 3.5 days, this is pretty close to that. 4.5 days unmitigated, they were able to go through and monitor emails and ultimately send out malicious emails. So, right, they did have some of the tools in place, and having the right tools is really important. but this attack could have been stopped earlier on, and sometimes having the right people, the right expertise in place is even more important than having the right tools. And I'd argue it's definitely a combination, but this is that same example, but with Barracuda XDR Cloud Security in place. So this is part of our managed SOC offering. It starts the same way. User gets a phishing email, they click the link, they enter credentials, the attacker logs in as that user, and in real time, when the system detects that unauthorized login, XDR has automated threat response capabilities, so it actually instantly disabled the compromised account. Our SOC team then sent a report, an immediate notification to the admin, details of the unusual login, steps that we took, and a playbook of further steps to remediate. So, right, just sort of having that team in place to be able to take instant action is sometimes saves us a lot of work and potential cost of being victim of attacks. So, right, you guys as partners, obviously, need to be prepared to deliver cyber resilience to your customers and try to mitigate these different risks that we've talked about to 365. So there's definitely a life cycle when it comes to being cyber resilient. Typically the first step, and this is what a lot of the focus goes on, we want to try to prevent the attacks. We want to protect these assets. As we've seen, the attackers can be pretty creative, don't like to give them too much credit, but some of the stuff they come up with is pretty clever, and sometimes an attack slips through. So no defense is going to be 100% perfect. That's where that next layer is crucial. We want to make sure that we're able to detect as quickly as possible to limit that amount of time that the attackers have to actually execute their plan. But again, quick detection is nothing without even quicker response. So based on that detection, we need somebody or a team in place to be able to eliminate that threat completely. And then no cybersecurity environment's complete without a way to recover from an attack. Sometimes that data ends up getting corrupted, encrypted, stolen, ransomed, and backup solution is that last step to be able to recover from some sort of attack. So how this translates to Barracuda, our mission is to provide coverage through this entire cybersecurity lifecycle where we want to help companies stay cyber resilient. So since we're on the topic of email, we provide security tools to try and stop those bad attacks from getting through. Couple different layers of security there, trying to prevent anything from hitting an inbox. But leveraging those tools in combination with our XDR, if there is something that slips through security, well, now we have tools in place to be able to detect any of those threats that might have bypassed the security measures that we had in place. So we want to allow our partners to quickly be aware of something that may need attention. And then obviously tools in place, like we used the example earlier, the XDR team was able to actually lock down that compromised account in about 30 seconds. So once that incident's been removed, once everything's been remediated, if there was any damage done due to any sort of data loss, that's where we provide backup solutions as well. For example, cloud-to-cloud backup to be able to restore anything from the 365 environment. So bringing this big picture brings us to the Barracuda One platform. So this, I know we sort of focused a lot on email. That's just kind of scratching the surface of what Barracuda offers. We do backup solutions, there's network solutions, we do provide application security. All of those are something that we want to include within a singular platform, right? We want to try to make it easy, and we'll go a little bit more into this, but we want to make it easy to know what's going on. We have data feeds that feed into our platform that we're using our AI to be able to pick out the most crucial alerts. So, as we're talking, managing this for tens of customers, hundreds of customers, it sometimes can be a needle in a haystack with all of these tools in place. What do I actually need to spend my time on? So that's where this all comes into play, where we want to centralize dashboards, centralize reporting. If you guys need assistance in managing this, right, and kind of leveraging Barracuda as a vendor to assist that cyber resiliency, that's where we talk about 24/7 managed SOC and XDR services. And then there is some key integrations here into some of the tools that you guys, I'm sure, use every day. Some of the big players, ConnectWise, ServiceNow, some of those different providers there. So mentioning Barracuda's goal, this is sort of what we live by every day. We want our stuff to be easy to buy, easy to deploy, and easy to use. And that's as we're developing new features, developing new products, and even Barracuda One is all trying to work towards these goals. So easy to buy. When it comes to the email solutions, we try to provide 3 simple plans. And in my mind, there's sort of 3 main distinctions that come out. The advanced plan, that first one, that's comprehensive defense against email threats. So that's everything we need to keep the bad emails out. It uses both spam filtering and sophisticated AI to try and do so. And if something does happen to get through security, that's where we have some of those post-delivery remediation tools available to help you rip things in mass out of users' inboxes. The middle plan, the premium plan, builds on top of this. So it's all of that stuff, but it adds some resiliency or some data protection. So specifically cloud-to-cloud backup for 365 environments, as well as a tool that we call Data Inspector, which is a DLP piece to prevent people from creating or sharing sensitive content through OneDrive or SharePoint. And then the last piece, Premium Plus, brings all of these together, but it adds a level of compliance to it as well. So if there's any companies that ever need to perform e-discovery and they need to present specific messages to auditors or lawyers, this includes an archiving piece or an email journaling piece. So these different tiered options, we've been through a different few iterations of them, and we worked really hard to try to make these in a way that they provide what our different customers are looking for. So we want to provide flexibility. We want to allow organizations the ability to choose the level of protection and compliance that really best fits their need and probably more importantly, their budget, right? So in terms of easy to deploy, I just want to go through this real quick, just a short video. But to get the email up and running is something that we've been working on making easier as we start developing more tools and building more complex pieces to kind of match the attacks, right? Sticking with our mantra, it needs to be easy to use at the same time. So getting the whole system up to speed, simply log into a Barracuda account. There's a setup button that kind of funnels us into this wizard. So a lot of these tools are based on global admin credentials and API access to the tenant. So just entering those and accepting some permissions. Now the system's learning and it's going through and training the AI as we speak to be able to prevent these more sophisticated types of attacks. Not a replacement for kind of front-end spam filtering. So simply tell us which region do we want to filter through. Go ahead and point the system to your mail server, and there's some auto discover there. And then typically we perform MX record deployment. So we'll provide you the records, put those into DNS, and go ahead and verify. And really, once we see those records in place, we can complete the setup, and we're good to go. And now the advanced package is pretty much deployed, and we're there protecting emails. Pretty simple. It needs to be easy to use as well. So we've made some key improvements to try to simplify our interfaces on that same theme of let's consolidate things and keep things less dispersed and really give admins a heads up of what is crucial and needs to be looked at. That's kind of where this has come from. We want to reduce the learning curve, especially for new partners, especially for new users, by implementing a single consistent navigation pattern. So things like a shared message log has been designed to try to make it easier for users to manage and monitor security, even if they're using multiple different layers of our email security. So overall, the updates that we've made recently, the goal here is to enhance usability and efficiency by providing a bit more cohesive and intuitive experience for all of our Barracuda users. And then just another video as an example. It's a newer feature for us, but really important that we came out with for our MSP partners is bulk remediation. So we have a tool called incident response, which is the tool that will allow our partners to bulk remediate emails from users' inboxes, which is great. But what if I'm managing, 15 different customers? How do I make sure I get it out of all of their mailboxes without having to run this 15 different times? So that's really what this is. This is an example of the message log that's showing an alert for one customer, and then simply find similar, search for similar across all of my accounts. And now this is loading all of my different accounts and seeing if they received copies of the email. I can then go ahead, once the search is done, hit delete all and let it know, yep, I do want to permanently delete these. System takes a couple of seconds here and deletes all of those matching emails. And now in, I don't know, what is this, a 30-second video, 30-second step of the wizard, I've now deleted about 20 different emails across 5 different accounts there. So really, really simple stuff. So talking of that kind of last layer of cyber resiliency, that recovery step, data protection is really the important player there. And we want to try to make that easy as well. So our cloud-to-cloud backup, we've gotten that down to about 5 minutes or less to be able to configure setting up backup of 365 as well as Entra ID objects. So there's no hardware to deploy, there's no software, nothing needs to access users' endpoints. This is simply an API tool that connects as an enterprise app to the tenant, automatically detects these different data points that we're seeing, Exchange, Teams, OneDrive. The one that's not here is Planner. We just probably in the last couple of weeks released Planner as a data source as well that we're able to back up. So again, tried to make it really, really simple to set this up, even easier to use. So going back to that managed XDR as that extension of your security team, we wanted to try and provide as much assistance as we can. So we know a lot of you can't staff 24/7, right? Attacks don't wait to just happen during the day. So if there is a network breach or somebody interacts with one of these malicious emails after hours, it could be 8-10 hours before somebody comes into the office the next day and is able to work on it, right? So let us staff a team 24/7 that has your back, and we can act as an extension of your help desk. So that's really what our XDR is designed to do. We focused a lot on email, but the team here is actually able to protect servers. We have server security, endpoint security, network security, and then also cloud environments. So things like 365, AWS, Okta Duo, right? Looking for those impossible sign-ins, that kind of stuff. And that's actually really the big star, especially relative to the example that we looked at earlier. This is the layer that helped that customer in that example, where it leveraged the built-in automated threat response and was able to kill access and reclaim a compromised account in about 30 seconds. So our SOC team here is monitoring not only Microsoft 365, but again, Google Workspace, Okta, Duo, AWS, kind of all of those big spaces that we're starting to see companies shift their workloads to. So again, if an attacker gains access to an environment, we're watching things like maybe there's a new global admin that was created, or a user's permissions have been elevated to global admin role. Maybe they've temporarily disabled MFA and try to gain access to accounts. It's also looking for things like bulk deletion of email, as well as the fun one, impossible travel, right? If we detect user logs in from Boston, and then 5 minutes later they've logged in from LA, we know they had to go multiple thousands of miles per hour to get there in the 5 minutes. So obviously that's not possible for a human, so something suspicious. And then something we've actually seen across our partner base is a huge push for vendor consolidation. You guys can let us know if that rings true with you, but we want to be that vendor. And right now, no other vendor is able to cover all of the different topics that we've talked about that are needed to protect M365 environments at the scale that Barracuda can. And then the best part, single point of contact for purchasing, right? You guys have one sales rep, no matter what you want to talk about, and one bill, which is the best part. There's support consolidation, so anyone that works help desk, it doesn't have to reach out to multiple different teams for multiple different products. You kind of all feed into the same support line and let us route you to the right people, right? You don't need to worry about calling into the right team. And then we also provide professional services. So as much as we want to make things easy to use, easy to deploy, we do have your back as well if you're a partner with Barracuda, and we can help you guys get up and running and always provide ongoing assistance. And then obviously the comprehensive protection, right? So I mentioned very briefly about the portfolio, very deep in the email space to prevent against malicious emails, allowing for different things like automatic remediation. There's obviously the XDR that we mentioned. We have a SOC team that's monitoring the environment for malicious behavior, indicators of compromise, things not necessarily related to email, but network or endpoint based. And then there's a whole line of data protection tools that we offer, network security tools like firewalls and WAFs, and then application security and web security as well. So things that we could not possibly fit into today's call, but if you guys want to learn a little bit more information, please reach out to us for that. And then anyone that missed the first minute here, there is a resources tab as part of this webinar, and I believe we will be sending it out afterwards, but we've published an email security breach report, which is where some of that data that we talked about at the beginning and some of the statistics came from. Definitely, right, take this information, evaluate it across your offering and your customers' Microsoft environments. And if you think there's a way that we can provide any help, reach out. We can set up calls with our team, provide demonstrations of products, and just provide any kind of consulting, answer any questions that we can. So speaking of questions, that brings us to the end of this here. If you guys have any questions, right, please put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, and we'll get those answered for you. I see one. What metrics or KPIs can MSPs use to demonstrate measurable security outcomes to their customers? So a lot of it is based around volume of threats or kind of amount of attacks that have been thwarted by the different security tools, right? I'm sure you guys see it. They might not need the sophisticated breakdown of statistics, but they want to see that what they're paying for is actually stopping attacks from getting through. So that's where some of our value reporting comes into play, where we can show typically month over month is what people like to see, amount of advanced threats stopped, that kind of stuff, as well as any kind of false positive rates is important too. We want to make sure that not only are we keeping the bad stuff out, but we're letting the good stuff through. What indicators should MSPs look for to detect account takeovers earlier? So I will say a lot of it, the best and quickest response definitely leverages some tools, and keep an eye out for alerting, right? Don't be like the person in our example where they ignored the notifications, but normally it's odd activity, suspicious emails being sent from a user's account. So if users are reporting that maybe one of their colleagues is sending odd emails, that's worth investigation. Keeping an eye on audit logs for logins to make sure that there's nothing odd there tends to be the most obvious one. What else do you guys got? Yeah, how do you structure your pricing? So relative to the email products, it's specifically number of licensed M365 users. So we decided to just copy how Microsoft bills. So the way I look at it, anyone that the customer is paying Microsoft for a license would be a billable Barracuda user. So if they do have a bunch of unlicensed shared mailboxes, that is stuff that we protect, but we don't bill for those. When we get into XDR, there's kind of those 5 different pillars. It varies a little about which service we're talking about. The endpoint security is obviously based on the number of endpoints. The cloud security, email security is based on the number of users. Server security, network security is based on the number of nodes, firewall, servers, respectively. Anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, as always, and I'm sure Kate will reiterate it, there's going to be that question the second we hang up that you wish you asked. Let us know, reach out to us. We will get those answered for you.
Yes, thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, as he mentioned, we feel free to reach out at any point. We would be happy to continue the conversation, get you looped in with the right person. But also just wanted to thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. And thank you, Kyle, for running us through that presentation. It was great to learn more about all of that. And as he mentioned, there is that report that might be useful to you guys. It's in the resources section, but we'll also make sure you guys receive it via email. So keep an eye out. There's some interesting statistics and everything in there that might be helpful in some of your conversations with your customers. So with that, we will wrap it up. I wish you all a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.